Hello and welcome to the Blue Collar Wealth Club podcast. I am your host today, Jerry Garcia, and we have a special guest today. We have Sean Hart of Modern Hart Realty. He's going to come on and discuss some things with us. He's kind of involved in a lot of different aspects of real estate, doing some long-term, some fix and flips, some short-term rentals, and kind of get into what he's doing and how he's doing it.
Doing good.
But yeah, how you doing,
Glad
Sean?
to be here.
Awesome. Well, appreciate you coming on. Just wanted to kind of start off with just kind of give us a little bit of your history, your background. How did you get started into real estate, and
So
what
I
came
started
before
out,
that?
I got my CDLA and started out as a tractor trailer driver. And through that process, my wife decided she wanted a house. And, I didn't want those mortgage payments because money coming out of the pocket. And we decided, I actually found a duplex online and I showed it to her and she was completely against it. And, we sat down, talked to her mom, and her mom was like, "Oh, this is a great idea." And all of a sudden, it was a great idea. So her mom gets credit for that one. But we ended up buying it and house hacked our way. So we bought it, moved into one side. And then I kind of got the bite, if you, so to speak, it got me as soon as especially once I started running the numbers and I saw like, wow, even with us living here, the tenant that's paying us rent is actually covering our entire mortgage plus an extra $50 towards our electric bill every month. And I was like, oh, okay. So we actually, we house hacked the next two properties as well. And that was where our journey began. And from there, we just kept it going.
No, that's awesome. I've always said, man, if I can go back and start my whole career buying real estate and just in life over, that would be totally how I started. House hacking, buying a 2, 3, 4-plex to start off and doing exactly what you're talking about, man. It's awesome. Especially here in Denver. 14, 15 years ago, that was a lot easier when I bought my first house than now. Now it would be pretty tough as a first-time home buyer, but
I've seen some prices out there. They're getting up there, that's for sure.
It's been a lot of growth. But yeah, so tell me, we were talking a little bit before here about what you got going on. It sounds like you've got kind of a lot going on.
So we're actually going down this weekend to Jacksonville, and we put in 80 offers on properties, and we're going to have 10 under contract going down there. We're going to go down there, check out the areas, make sure they're in decent areas, check the condition of the properties, make sure they're in the same condition as, basically the pictures show. And from there, we'll close on them. And some of them are going to be long-term rentals. And then some of them will be, there's like 1 or 2 fix and flips in there. And then we're going to have probably 1 or 2 short-term rentals in there as well. Or we'll do the Airbnb, what is it, FSBO?
Yep. Well, yeah. Tell me a little bit about how you manage that, because that's a lot of offers going out at once. A lot of properties that how are you managing all that? Do you have a team with you?
I mean, realistically, my team is me, my wife, and my business partner on the real estate brokerage itself. We're all involved in it on the day-to-day. We run the brokerage. I'll be the head of the property management as far as the rental property. But the reality is, like, you don't really need a large team if you have the right structure and the right processes in place. It's just about staying on top of things and just making sure everything's getting taken care of, and communicating is the biggest thing, especially when you have other people with you.
Absolutely. Now, how did you guys decide on Jacksonville? Is that an area you target often? Or?
Jacksonville has actually been very interesting because I was going to invest in Jacksonville 2 years ago, and I didn't pull the trigger, and I didn't pull it last year. And it was one of those things where I saw there was a lot of money that was going to be going into Jacksonville, and I should have bought 2 years ago. I shot myself in the foot because now the prices are about $50,000 higher per property. But realistically, they just approved $1.4 billion in the stadium renovations. They did another $96 million for the surrounding community around the stadium. They haven't even talked about the fact that the owner of the Jaguars actually owns the old State Fairgrounds in Jacksonville, and that he wants to do like a grand entrance to the stadium, like this big madhouse.
Right.
That's going to be somewhere in the $50 to $100 million project. I saw an article a couple weeks ago. They want to put like this huge glass mixed-use building in downtown Jacksonville. It's going to be like a $100 million project. So as soon as they announced that $1.4 billion to the stadium, it was one of those things where it was like people took notice, and you can already see a huge influx of investors going down there. And that was kind of like my trigger in my mind. I'm like, you know what? It's either now or never.
Absolutely. No, that's great insight. What markets have you focused
Generally,
on
we have been
traditionally?
in the upstate New York market, just north of Syracuse. We've looked around here. It's a little different for us because we came from a very depressed real estate market where housing values are traditionally very low. You can get into a house, you can buy a house that needs work for 10 to 30 grand and put 40, 50 into it, and your cash on cash return is absurd. Like one of the properties that we have up there, we bought it for $28,000. We put 40,000 into it, and the rents on that were $1,500 downstairs and $1,400 upstairs. I'll let you do the math.
Wow. Okay, yeah, that's definitely a different type of market. I think those markets are few
They
and
are,
far
and I mean
between these
it does
days.
come with other things as well. It gets very political. It is very much a tenant friendly state, and you have to navigate those waters as well. It has a lot to do with your risk tolerance and your ability to put up with things that you wouldn't normally have to put up to in a lot of the southern states.
Sure. Now, when you guys are looking at properties, what are like some of the attributes? How are you shopping for them? What are the things that stick out to you when you look to make an offer on a
Oh,
property?
depending on it, it depends on what strategy we're going in with. When we look at our fix and flips, the worse the better, always. I don't care what condition the property is in. It could be half fallen over, I'll fix it. But when we look at our rental properties, generally, so we have a bunch of different strategies. We'll do cash offers, we do subject to offers, we do seller finance offers, and each one of those comes with a different set of criteria that, quite honestly, we could probably go into for 6 more episodes. But generally, when we look for rentals, we're looking for something that's turnkey or close to it, and we're looking for a deal. Realistic. If the after repair value is going to be 200,000, and I have to put $10,000 into it, I'm looking for a deal. I'd like to get it somewhere where I can buy it with have a little bit less money out of pocket when I go to refi it into from a hard money loan to a DSCR loan. So if I can get it for like 140, 150, I'll take that all day.
No, that's awesome. Let's talk a little bit about the creative financing because I think that's always an interesting topic. I think one of the barriers to entry for a lot of new investors is finding out how they come up with that down payment money, right? You're talking about options that can lower that number for people, so maybe it's a little more palatable and they can see a path to getting not into just one property, but maybe into multiple.
I absolutely love that you just asked that because 3 of the deals that we have right now, they are subject to properties. So we're taking over the existing loan in the owner's name, and they're actually doing a seller carry on the backside. One of them's for 60,000, one of them's for 26,000, the other one's for I think it's 43, not positive, but I'm pretty sure. 0% interest on the seller carry. So when we go to the closing table, all we have to pay for is closing costs.
Right, and then you're renting those out long term and letting that pay down the balance that you owe to the mortgage company and then to them on
Absolutely.
the back end. Very interesting. Let's just talk about some of the little technicalities of that. Are you making payments to both the mortgage company and to them at the same time, or are they just holding on to that note and with no payments due until
So
the
that's kind of the
mortgage is
beautiful
paid
thing
off?
about the creative financing is that everything is negotiable. And one of the things we do push for is for them to take that monthly payment because a lot of people, they get a little bit antsy when they don't see any sort of value. So even though it may be like 50 to $100 a month, they see value coming in. They see the money coming in. So we do push a lot for that, for them to take the monthly payments. We'll pay the mortgage and then we'll cut a separate check for them generally. Occasionally, yeah, we'll try to push to see if we can get a year of no payments or so, but that's usually if the numbers are tight right now. Like right now, being later in the year, housing prices are higher than what market rents are generally near the end of the year because people are preparing for that rate increase for the next year. The rents, the fair market rents, however they invest, Section 8 could be traditional public rents. So the housing market starts to outpace it a little bit. We do try to pay them month to month, every month, just cut them a check. But there's plenty of times, now is a big time where there are times that we're like, hey, it's due 4 to 6 months, a year with, no payments on the seller finance. It also depends on how much they're carrying as well.
Okay. Now, are you guys doing anything special? How are you guys finding these deals that are open to subject to or creative financing? You guys doing anything
So
special there to find
generally,
those?
not really. Anybody can do it. A lot of people, they pull public records, things like that, and call. Like they do a lot of cold calling, or they'll get a VA to cold call, a virtual assistant. We've done it in the past. It's just not a high success rate. What we actually did this time was we went through every single property that we could find that fit the criteria we were looking for in Jacksonville, which was over 80. And we have an agent down in Florida, and we just had her submit offers.
And those offers included the terms for
Yep. And
creative
then, so
financing.
what she was doing was she would go call the agent. Number one, to make sure that they understand what subject to is, because that's the big thing. That's the biggest obstacle you're going to face right now. There's a lot of agents that don't understand sub two, and they will immediately discard it as non-optional no, which huge disservice to their clients. Your job as a real estate agent is to stay up with the market trends. Subject to and seller financing have become huge, especially in Florida, Texas, Alabama's starting to get big, Georgia's starting to get big with it, Arizona's a huge one. By not knowing how to do these things, you're doing your clients a huge disservice. So she'll call them, make sure they understand what subject to is or the seller finance, and then kind of throw it out there and say, are they open to it? They go back. If they are, then we'll talk about terms, but we'd never throw the terms out there right out the gate. It's just one of those things where,
sure,
unless they're prepared for it, they generally don't receive it well.
No, I think that's a great point. I think people are definitely wary, especially real estate agents. Especially there's been a big influx of real estate agents over the past 5 to 7 years, and it's been mostly a pretty easy market. And so a lot of, I think, real estate agents didn't have to learn about any of these sorts of creative financing, or because it was just really a lot of traditional deals, and they could stick to that niche and be very successful, right? And now that the market has turned quite a bit, you do have to kind of do a little bit of digging and be more involved in the other aspects of real estate that maybe
and it just comes down to thinking outside the box. And anytime I have my real estate license as well with the brokerage here, and anytime I go to a listing appointment, one of the first things I ask them is what they're thinking for a price, and then if they are open to some sort of creative solution, because the reality is, like, that is another avenue that we can take to help you sell your home and possibly get more than what the market will bear for it. Because a lot of the times, if you've got a low interest rate, somebody will overpay for that property because the numbers still work even at an over market price.
No, that's a very excellent point as well. If you can take on the financing that was financed 3-4 years ago, when interest rates were down in the 3s and 4s, that opens up a door for a lot more buying power for a buyer. That's a great point. Now, what are the challenges with something like a subject to? When you have to have title obviously transferred over to you as the new owner, yet the mortgage company may not be as open.
So I mean, number one biggest thing is the due on sale clause. Once the name on the title transfers over, the deed transfers over to the new buyer, you always run the risk of having the note called due. At that point, you have a couple options. You can work with the bank. Generally, they're actually not as bad as people think. You can deed the property back over and just leave that file open, and usually they'll leave you alone. Generally, if they don't call it due in the first 3 months, usually you're in the clear. There's other options of doing some sort of assumption or just talking with them and just seeing what the options are, but it's really on how you approach them. And I know a lot of people, they get the due on sale clause and they freak out, and then they call the bank and they're like, if you go to them with a level head and a business mind, they're a lot more open to having a conversation with you and working with you on it.
Have you dealt with that in the past where you've had a due
Me
on sale
personally,
clause
no.
come about?
Some of my investors, yes.
Yeah. Okay. And that's good, because that's interesting. I've never had anybody who actually had that call due, and I've never come across, how do you approach that? And you just approach the bank, like you said, level head, as if it's a business, and see what options there are, right? Instead of freaking out and trying to hide it, push it and shove it under the rug. Have a conversation, come up with a solution that satisfies both you and the bank, and likely continue
you're
forward with the deal.
You're both in a business. They want to make their money. They want to make sure their money is secure. And as long as you can go to them with that level of confidence and security that you're going to make those payments and it's a non-issue, they're going to work with you. They don't want the house. They want their money. And they want their interest.
That's what it's all about, really, is that, they're getting that return on their risk, and as long as they can make sure that they feel like they're going to get paid back, I think there's a solution there. So that's a great point. I think the due on sale clause is something that scares a lot of people, especially with subject to. That's definitely interesting. Now, on the seller finance side, how are you working that? That's a little bit different of a strategy. So that's more where the seller typically owns it free and clear, right? And they're just basically loaning you the equity and
Yeah,
becoming the
I
bank
mean, seller
themselves.
finance is even easier as far as, negotiating your way through it and, buying the property. It's just a much simpler process. Generally, like you said, they usually own it outright, and they just, especially with rentals, they just don't want to deal with it anymore. But they're still an investor. A lot of the times, like I still
Right.
consider those people that we do seller finance with, I consider those my investors as well, because at the end of the day, they paid for the property. They bought the property, they used the property for however long, and then they're selling it to me, but they're holding the note. They're acting as the bank. So realistically, it's no different than me going to one of my investors and saying, hey, I need X amount of dollars for this property. It's the same concept. So really, they're an investor all the same for me to come in. And I mean, it's a very simple transaction. Once you find someone willing to do it, you negotiate the terms, you go to the closing table. There's no banks involved. You don't have to worry about a due on sale clause. As long as you make those payments on time, you're golden.
Right. They still have their lien on the property, so if for some reason you weren't able to perform, they get to take the house back and start the process over. Maybe not ideal, but at least they still have that kind of collateral. Seller financing is underrated, depending on it's definitely more common in some markets than others, simply because in some markets you're able to pay houses off, and in others it's a lot more of a challenge. It's a great thing. I mean, you don't hear it very often right now on the single family side. How are you seeing terms compared to what a bank would offer you on seller financing?
Far and beyond better. One of the, oh yeah,
It's usually
absolutely.
the
One of the
case.
deals we're actually doing right now when we go down there, it's a purchase price of 285. He's got a 3-year balloon on it, so we have to refi or pay it off within the 3 years, but he's doing a 0% seller carry. So there's no interest on it. You can't beat that. It's all principal payment.
Yeah,
Oh,
bank's not
God,
going
no.
to do
But
that for you.
generally, if you're going to go into a seller finance deal, you just want to be able to outperform what a bank could do. Otherwise, you might as well just go to the bank. So if a bank's going to charge you 20% down, then you need to be less than 20% down. If a bank's going to charge you 8% interest, then you need to be less than 8% interest. If you can get in at 5, 6%, you're winning because the bank's going to charge you 8.
No, that's great, man. Love to see that you're doing so many different strategies at once. How did you get from your first kind of couple house hacks to building up to where you're at now? What was that process like to build up this portfolio that
I
you've
think
been
the
able to
biggest
build
thing
up?
was driving the tractor trailer. I did a lot of things that other people weren't willing to do. I traveled out of state for the company that I was working for almost 7 years. And I went to other distribution centers for them and ran locally out of those. And I was gone for 3 weeks out for 2 days home. And during that time, I had my first daughter. I was home for 3 weeks, went back out of state for 3 weeks to be home for 2 days. When we had my second daughter, I was home for 3 days and went back out on the road. So there was a lot of sacrifice along the way.
Wow.
And I don't want people to think it's going to be easy because it's never easy and everything comes with a sacrifice. I was sleeping 4 hours a day for years. Terrible for you. Put on a ton of weight over that time. But the reality is, like, you need to make sacrifices and you need to decide what your core values are and what you're willing to sacrifice versus what you are unwilling to sacrifice, that you're going to make this happen. And that's how we did it. I took every penny that I made from that driving job and I put it back into investment properties, and all the capital that we made, all the rents, everything that we made outside of the expenses went right back into the rental property for almost 8 years.
That's one of the things I've talked about a lot on this podcast is we don't really sell a lot of quick solutions. Like, is there ways to do it? Like, one of the things I talk about is, you can achieve that 5 years to financial freedom, but it does take sacrifice. I mean, it does take you having the discipline and making some sacrifices to get there. I mean, you do have to be disciplined with your money, with your spending habits, and with putting that money into the right areas. And then you have the opportunity to live any sort of life you want after that. So the sacrifices are there. There's long-term solutions, there's shorter-term solutions, but there's no quick fixes in these
Absolutely.
games.
One of the best quotes I think I've heard, I don't even know who said it. If you want to make $1 million, start with 2 million. It's the easiest way to put it, because the only get rich quick program you're ever going to see is by starting out as a millionaire.
Yeah, that certainly makes it a lot easier. No, that's awesome, man. Really appreciate all the insight on this, on what you're giving us here. Things I always like to ask is I like to ask for a book recommendation, something you read or listened to that really kind of gave you some either inspiration or some really tangible skills to
So
kind
I
of get
think
where
one
you're
of
at.
the the most important books I think anybody could ever read is Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. But it's actually three books by the same author that I currently read. It's Good Habits, The Power of Discipline, and they're by Daniel Walter. And the three
No
of those
worries.
books, they're so easy to read. They're up to date, like with today's standard. And they're just really powerful books to go through and you read and you understand them. And they just seem to sink in so quick. And then the fourth book, it actually has nothing to do with real estate at all. It's actually 12 Months to a Million. And I don't remember who writes it, but it has so many principles and understandings in it that like it helps you understand like though $1 million is a lot of money, when you actually break it down, it's not that much, especially when you look at the hundreds of billions and trillions of dollars that are going on every single day. $1 million, when you break it down, is actually very much achievable for most people if they put the dedication and determination and the mind, which is the biggest thing, committing to it. $1 million is not that difficult to get to.
Yeah, no, I agree with all of that 100%. So that's cool. We'll definitely put those books in the show notes. If somebody wants to get in touch with you and kind of learn a little bit more about what you do or utilize your services, what's the best way for them to
Email is
contact
usually
you?
the best. Gives me time to respond, and it's there. It's not going anywhere. Email is Shawn, SHAWN, at modernacquisition, no S at the end, .com.
Perfect. Put all that in the show notes. Well, Shawn, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate all the insight you provided today. I think it's a very valuable episode for the guest, and appreciate we'll have to have
Yes,
you back
sir.
on
I'd love to be
another
on.
time. Awesome. Till next time, everyone.